Om Swastiastu. This is Jack Daniels welcoming you to this Bali Update podcast from BaliDiscovery.com. In today's podcast, we are very honored to be joined by the Minister of Tourism and the Creative Economy for the Republic of Indonesia, Sandiaga Uno. Less than 3 months ago, on December 22nd, 2020, today's guest was asked by Indonesian President Joko Widodo, as part of a midterm reshuffle, to join his Onward Indonesia cabinet to lead the tourism sector, which has been among the worst affected parts of the national economy by the COVID-19 pandemic. A successful self-made businessman who co-founded two of Indonesia's leading capital investment companies, Minister Sandiaga is a graduate of two U.S. universities, Wichita State University, where he earned his undergraduate degree, and later, George Washington University, where he received an MBA. As a politician, Minister Sandiaga has served as the Deputy Governor of Jakarta before leaving that position to become the Vice Presidential running mate of Prabowo Subianto in 2019. It is no doubt a measure of the man who is our guest today and the very high regard in which he is held that President Joko Widodo, his opponent in the last presidential election, called on him to help lead the nation and serve as tourism minister. Minister Sandiaga Uno, welcome and thank you for taking the time to meet with our international audience on today's podcast.
Swastiastu, Jack. And Matur Suksma for having me.
Minister Sandiaga, you came into office as Indonesia's new Minister of Tourism and the Creative Economy just 2 days before Christmas in December of last year. Clearly, the president was looking for change in the tourism sector to lead Indonesia's economic recovery. When you were invited to lead the tourism sector less than just 3 months ago, did President Joko Widodo provide any specific tasks and goals he wanted you to accomplish on behalf of the Indonesian tourism sector?
Well, thank you, Jack. First of all, it was really tough time. It has been for the past 1 year for the sectors. And 34 million Indonesians are depending their livelihood on the tourism and creative economy sectors. 13 million around in the tourism and around 21 million from the creative economy sectors. The president's first directive was overall to prepare the 5 super priority destinations that's behind me here. Obviously, Danau Toba over here, Labuan Bajo, Borobudur, Mandalika, and Likupang that I just visited last week. The president wants these 5 super priority destinations will be able to revive the tourism sectors and its derivatives, and to prepare 360 degrees to make sure that they are having not only the infrastructures, but also the interconnectivity, as well as the telecom and internet infrastructures and all the creative economy products, so that it would be able to basically have the sights, the sounds, the vibrations, the feel, the taste from the culinary experience to the fashions, all the way to handicrafts. This year is a year of an awakening. 1 year to prepare the readiness of the super priority destinations. And we have to really work hard to make sure that the tourism and creative economy sectors will be able to survive, and we're able to revive. And hopefully post-pandemic, we will thrive. But when you talk about tourism, Jack, it has to include Bali somewhere. So my first visit was actually to Bali. and I realized that the devastating impact of this pandemic to the Bali economy. So people like you who makes Bali home already, we we need to work hand in hand to make sure that we work together to see how we could, you know, make sure the jobs are still there, and we prepare for reopening of the tourism sectors within the strict and disciplined health protocol.
Bali continues to suffer devastating economic impact from the global coronavirus pandemic. The island is suffering unprecedented levels of unemployment as foreign tourist arrivals have completely disappeared. Meanwhile, domestic tourist arrivals, although improving, are still insufficient to restart and fill Bali's hotels, restaurants, shops, and tourism attractions. Minister Sandiaga, can you outline some of the incentives and financial supports that you have put in place by your ministry and by the central government to bolster and assist Indonesia's tourism industry survive and persevere in the current crisis?
Well, the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy has introduced Indonesia Care, which is, in short, I do care. It's a message that we want to signal to the sectors, in particular the people who are working in the sectors, that we have a strong effort in implementing various measures. First is their livelihood. We are targeting this grant. We call it Tourism and Creative Economy Grant. It's around 3.3 trillion last year, which about 70% was distributed to the sectors, in particular people who are in the lower economy strata, and also to the hotels and restaurants to provide liquidity for them in order to face this liquidity crunch. Secondly, our strong effort is also on the cleanliness, health, safety, and environmental sustainability protocols across the tourism industry as a mandatory precautions. We are certifying tourist destinations with this strict protocols and certifications so that people who travel would feel safe and secure. The Indonesian government will continue its stimulus program for the tourism sector this year, including the grant program. 70% of the grant program this year, like last year, would be absorbed by the sectors, while 30% will be distributed by the local governments. We're allocating this year another 3.3 trillion. And we're also preparing a number of stimulus programs, such as incentives for the sectors, creative economy. We're also providing movement for cleaning the beach, cleaning the destinations, restoring some of the infrastructures. We have a program called BISA, Bersih, Indah, Sehat, and Aman. And this is basically covering cleanliness, the beauty, the health aspect, as well as the security. I was just talking to since you brought it up, my ex-running mate, who is now Minister of Defense, and he also has a lot of concern to the sector. And I think the one thing that we need to do during this pandemic is how we could touch the livelihood of the people, and programs such as to make sure that the country is clean, beautiful, safe, and also the health aspect is being taken care of, is the sort of like the type of projects and activities that would be needed because once we open up our border again, we would be ready to receive under this new strict health protocol foreign tourists. Last but not least, we are expanding the pre-employment training card program that is being labeled as prakerja or pre-employment for tourism worker as well as for development of new tourism destinations. So yeah, I think our plate is full. A lot of people are looking at us. They want us to take a larger mandate in order to restart the tourism as a signal to bring back Indonesian economy.
Minister Sandiaga, the assistance that the ministry and the central government are giving to the tourism sector is truly appreciated. But of course, as an industry, many of our colleagues here in Bali are finding it hard to meet this month's electrical bill. We're hanging on by our fingertips in a crisis that nobody can reasonably predict when it's going to end. As frequently quoted in the national press, you've emphasized the need to secure high levels of COVID-19 immunization and the need for Bali's strict adherence to health and hygiene protocols in order to achieve a level of immunity needed for Bali to reopen its borders to tourism. In fact, I believe that both you and your wife, Ibu Sandiaga, have thankfully recovered after testing positive for the coronavirus in December of last year. So, Minister, can I ask, what is your professional view on what level of general vaccination is needed for Bali to develop immunity as an island? And when can the island expect to achieve that level of inoculation?
Well, first of all, we both recover from COVID, me and my wife, towards the end of December. And I basically have been encouraging the people to adopt a 3M, which is wearing masks, maintaining social distance, and always on a regular basis washing their hands. And I've been advocating also 3 T's, which would be testing, contact tracing, as well as treatment. And now, thank God, Indonesia are among the first countries in the region to start the vaccinations program. And to make a priority, inoculations of tourism and creative economy workers would be my initial initiatives. And thankfully, we have received cooperations from my colleagues in the cabinet. And Minister of Health, Pak Budi, have started and kickoff of the program was last week in Bali. I really appreciate the public-private collaborations in establishing the Grab Vaccine Center in Bali Nusa Dua Convention Center, BNDCC, and to administer the COVID-19 vaccinations for tourism and creative economy sectors and the players on the not only Bali but other parts of the heavy involvement of tourism in the economy. We target 5,000 people consisting of 2,500 people from the tourism and the creative economy sectors, while the other 2,500 people are from the general public. I do hope that the first vaccinations program carried out by this tourism and creative economy actors can accelerate the recovery of the tourism sector and the creative economy. But at the end of the day, Jack, to achieve herd immunity, you would need 70% of the general populations in that particular island. Bali is quite simple because Bali, you go by air or by car or by from the sea. And this is something that you need to be strict in order to fulfill the status of what I would say a travel corridor. I think we need to focus on two areas first, and this is where the government of the local government of Bali province have agreed that we are pushing Nusa Dua and Ubud to receive basically almost 100% level of vaccinations, so that it could be designated as green zone. And that's around 120,000 doses of vaccines. Secondly, we are going to discuss next week, in fact, how the inter-ministries can work out an arrangements whereby on a pilot project basis, we can start receiving foreign tourists on a pilot project basis, as I said earlier, soon rather than later. Because if we wait for the vaccination rollout, it will be months. So if we could establish these green zones, if we could establish much success in the distributions of the vaccine, higher compliance to the health protocol, and strengthening the testing, tracing, and treatment, I think hopefully within a short period of time, I don't want to overpromise, that we could see this pilot project to kickstart sooner rather than later.
Well, thank you for that, Minister. Much mention has been made of travel bubbles and COVID-free corridors, which of course the immunization would make possible. And if we have those corridors, the idea is that this can restart the flow of international tourism. In Bali, the mainland Chinese have been mentioned as one of the first countries with which Bali could reopen for business using COVID-free corridors or travel bubbles. Can you perhaps explain to our listeners how a COVID-free corridor, for instance, between China and Bali might actually work?
The COVID-19 free corridors, we need to probably should not really use a very strong word like COVID-free, but more like a travel corridor arrangements is actually already being worked on a different scheme in North Sulawesi. I was in Manado last week. So basically, charter flights are coming into Manado 3 to 4 times a week, carrying out 150 foreign workers under a very strict, either they have been vaccinated or they are tested negative using PCR. And then they are on a 5 days quarantine in Manado. And then they could then continue if declared free of or negative status on a COVID test. They could start going to the southeast part of Sulawesi as workers in the nickel mine. So based on that, together with the Bali Tourism Board or the local government of Bali province, with the other stakeholders, we are working on this travel corridor arrangements involving Nusa Dua and Ubud in the first place. But it will depend on the epidemiological measures in the tourism destinations in Indonesia, as well as the originating market. At the moment, we're still working on finalizing the best options in terms of flow, and we're trying to test it out. I don't want to preempt this, but the meeting will take place soon among Foreign Ministry, Ministry for Justice and Law, Ministry of Transports, the COVID-19 Task Force, Minister of Health. And we have initiated this concept to reopen Bali tourism to several countries such as China, Singapore, and other countries. And a couple of days ago, Uzbekistan included. As for Bali and Poland, As for Bali, we're preparing Nusa Dua and Ubud, as I said, and we could expand it to Nusa Penida and maybe other locations whereby local governments would be in a positions to give us directions where these green zones for international tourists. Indonesia has already established the travel corridor arrangements with the UAE, China, South Korea, and Singapore for those traveling with diplomatic or fundamental business activities and objectives. But as you correctly pointed out, China will be the most ready because they have existing demand. They're willing to follow and comply to this travel corridor arrangement. So hopefully we're keeping our fingers crossed so that we could execute this as soon as possible.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, to change direction slightly for a moment, Bali was already suffering from an oversupply of hotel and villa accommodation. And as Bali now rebuilds in the future months, hopefully, tourist numbers will undoubtedly gradually return, but perhaps in fewer numbers than we enjoyed in the past. A price war is already underway in Bali among hotels that are remained open, and many fear that's only going to become worse over time. Minister Sandiaga, what, if anything, can be done to avoid the aggressive price war in Bali among hotels that will see hotels selling at rates that are perhaps not financially sustainable?
I believe post-COVID-19, Jack, tourism will be much more customized, personalized, localized, and smaller in size. I suppose the price war could be inevitable as the world we live in today is actually more competitive in any market, including tourism. Therefore, I encourage hotels to start differentiating and not just compete on a price basis, but differentiating in terms of experience, in terms of how they could customize and personalize, offering customers better customers experience by fulfilling their needs, such as sustainability, such as basically carbon neutrality. And there's a fine line between competitive pricing and a price war. But the industry have been able to sort of like work within their boundaries, and prices can be lowered only to a point where it doesn't hurt the hotel along with its brands. I personally, before I joined the government, I'm a businessman myself, and we own several hotels. And I think hotels that would be able to differentiate its offerings based on the new trend will be pandemic winner. And more significantly, I think the hotel's profitability is really, really now devastated because of the pandemic. And I think engaging in a price war will be a destructive to its sustainability. And it could really means like a permanent damage to the sector. So I encourage hotels operator and people within the industry to play a role in transforming Indonesia tourism into a quality and sustainable tourism. Maybe they change their gensets that so far have been operating on a solar, on a fuel that is hydrocarbon to more green and renewable. And there are a lot of money managed by Green Fund that could help them transform their energy into a renewable energy. So I request in this podcast for the tourism stakeholders in Indonesia, in particular Bali, to mutually provide a much better, exceptional tourism experience for the tourists to achieve their better destinations competitiveness and actualize the sustainable tourism agenda. This will go along with a longer length of stay, higher spending, And Indonesia already has the commissions for the supervisions of business competitions, by the way, when you mentioned predatory pricing. And we need to implement law number 5, 1999, about anti-monopoly practice and unfair business competitions. I suggest the tourism industry across the country to also engage us in order to comply to such law, so that it doesn't shoot itself in the foot, and we should work together.
Your minders, Minister Sandiaga, are telling us that you're a busy man with more appointments to go to. So let me cut to our last question, and it's
Okay.
still on the subject of change.
I think we have 3 other questions. Go ahead. Don't cut it.
Don't cut it. Well, we were happy to ask you more questions if we don't make anyone angry looking after you today. Many hotel projects in Bali have been abandoned during the current crisis, with many shops and restaurants having ceased operations. If you visit any of the main tourist areas in Bali right now, there are large tracts of empty shops and restaurants intermixed with the skeletons of abandoned and half-built hotels in areas such as Tanjung Benoa, Kuta, and Pachatu, and they're frankly becoming something of an eyesore. So moving forward, what can be done to create an image of an island with a robust commerce?
Well, I now moved my headquarters to Bali, as you know. I'm spending more time in my office in the Polytechnic, Tourism Polytechnic in Desa Kampiao, near Nusa Dua in Badung. And I see with my own eyes how this situation is really unbearable. So yes, the virus have put pressures to mobility to the travelers. And I'm really seeing that this pandemic, I guess, in a way, give us a sort of like a small break to, because there's so much development, so much hotel projects, and sometimes it runs against the sustainability nature. So I think Bali could still be it is now the top destinations where people want to go post-pandemic, but it's beautiful, white sand beaches, paddy fields, mountains, and culture can continue to be the most attractive reasons why people would visit Bali. So I think this pandemic would be a good time for us to sit down and see what type of effort that we could do together to flatten the curve in terms of the virus infections, but also preparing how Bali going forward could be more inclusive. And I have a strong interest in the Desa Wisata, which is the rural tourism, and how program that would empower SMEs and its ecosystems can prevail.
Well, we're in desperate need of what I call retail therapy in Bali, because many of the buildings are actually to the state where they're starting to fall in within themselves, and people staying in our hotels certainly will want to go out for a cup of coffee and some shopping. And of course, the shops and the restaurants and the stores in Bali are a big part of our small and medium-sized enterprise. So we look forward to more news on that. If we look globally, the world has truly changed. The airlines have shrunk. Huge, powerful airlines are now becoming regional carriers with most of their fleets parked. Perhaps the days of cheap airfares are at an end. The hotel, meeting, and MICE business has no doubt fundamentally changed, and the underlying financial structures have undergone a great deal of change as well. Minister, as an economist and a business management leader, what are some of the ways you think that the tourism business has changed because of the global pandemic? And what suggestions can you offer to the industry on how to face these many changes ahead?
I think crisis always brings the best of humanity, how we could innovate, how we could adapt, and how we could collaborate. Um, I'm seeing that the ecosystem of our tourism industries are dominated by the small and medium enterprises. I think the COVID-19 pandemic would force us to look at the ecosystem. So how do we identify pandemic winners to create a theme post-pandemic and to be able to not only survive, but create a momentum to revive the sectors as well as to thrive. And I think I've gone through this myself, few crises during my days as businessman. I've been working very hard, and most of the gains that I made is the investments during the crisis. So I'm trying to give hope to people out there that if you persevere and focus on things that would be economically value added, you would be a pandemic winner.
Minister Sandiaga, as a final question this evening, and I think a follow-on from your last answer, staying on the subject of change, what does Indonesia, and particularly Bali in particular, need to do to create new tourism markets and diversify Bali's economy? Many observers on the island think that perhaps Bali has become over-dependent, over-reliant on tourism.
Well, like it or not, Jack, Bali is even more popular than Indonesia itself. Bali is in itself a global brand that is top of mind of people when they think about holiday. So Bali will continue to be the main attractions. Trip advisors have ranked Bali again on the top of the list, beating London and Dubai by a long mile. And I think people have to go to explore Bali. I've been to Bali, West Bali, North Bali. There's a lot to explore. And I've been to Bali many times during my life, and I always find new things to do in Bali. So the government has to develop like small pockets of attractions across Bali. And I think we need to embrace local communities to take part. For instance, Gianyar for its art, Klungkung maybe for Nusa Penida, to take some of the load of Badung, maybe Singaraja or North Bali could focus on basically diving or agricultural tourism is also big, rural tourism. And also on top of that, the government is developing new Bali destinations like the 5 destinations, but it's a long way before we reach to the Bali quality. And Bali is such an important brand for Indonesia's tourism. So amid the pandemic, we're refocusing our plan. The 5 super priority tourist destinations is our priority now, and the Bali awakening, I think, is much needed. That's why we are definitely making it our first priority. And then we would have the other 5 super priority destinations to add to the experience. And hopefully, we have a much strong offering for more quality and more sustainable tourism and creative economy going forward. Thank you very much, Jack, for the chat, and I really look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully. And please reach out to me and my other colleagues if you need any other news or clarifications. Thank you very much. And with that, I close. Bye-bye.
Our guest today on Bali Update Podcast has been Indonesia's Minister of Tourism and the Creative Economy, Sandiaga Uno. Minister Sandiaga, my personal and profound thanks for taking the time, you're a very busy man, to speak to our podcast audience. I'm sure I speak on behalf of our many colleagues and friends in the Indonesian tourism industry in Bali when I say we all pledge our undying support and offer our sincere prayers for you and your vitally important work on behalf of the Indonesian Republic. Again, Bapak Menteri, our sincere thanks. To our listeners, be sure to subscribe to our podcast channel and our weekly Bali Update newsletter by visiting our website, www.balidiscovery.com. Minister, from the island of Bali, our typical closing, Om Shanti 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 Om.